Our weekly joke. Get started. Yeah. So this Jewish woman calls in her daughter, and she says to her, it was a hard decision, but I've decided that I'm not going to go with burial, I'm going to go with cremation. The daughter says, oi. She said, but you know more than that. I'm going to take all my ashes, and I'm going to spread it out all over the Yorkdale shopping mall. The daughter says, why? Why would you do something like that? She says, this way I know you'll visit me at least once a week. That was just a joke, by the way. It's not recommended. Today's class is basically about burial versus cremation. Obviously, we all know that the Jewish approach is burial. But what is the ethical dilemma over here? What is the ethical question that we're going to talk about? So it's an interesting question. Is, let's say, someone opens up their parents' last will and testament, and they see that the parent says they want to have a cremation. And it's unfortunately, from my perspective, it's become a popular thing in recent times. So there's a good chance for that. And the mother or the father says they want to be cremated. And we all know that there's one of the greatest mitzvahs of the Torah is honor your father and mother, to respect your parents' wishes, right? And if they tell you that's what they want, you would think that that's what you need to do. However, on the other hand, if you believe that that's the wrong thing to do, and you are the person responsible, you are the trustee, right? Trustee for your parents, but you feel it's morally, ethically wrong or religiously wrong for yourself, right? Are you forced to do something that's against your beliefs? So here we have this. So this is the moral quandary. Are there any cases where cremation would be okay, or cremation would be okay for a person to participate in? And we all know about different people that have had cremations, and it's a real thing that's out there. And there's always a question that Ray asked the rabbi: am I allowed to go there, to be there, to having a ceremony? And there's always the question of whether or not, after the person is turned into ashes, can you bury them in a Jewish cemetery? A lot of times you have people coming saying, Rabbi, maybe we could take the ashes and at least give them some form of burial so the kids can have a place to go and visit, right? So let's talk about this a little bit more, and talk a little bit about why we all know that burial is such an important thing in Jewish life. Why is that the case? So let's go look a little bit at Jewish sources. You'll see that the entire Torah is filled with the concept of burial. Is starting from Adam himself, Adam and Eve, the very, very first person, if you recall, when Adam and Eve, when God spoke to them after the sin of the eating from the tree of knowledge. So we see that it says about God says to Adam, and you'll give a look over here, Genesis 3:19. This is God communicating with the very first human being, with Adam. He says, by the sweat of your brow, you see that? By the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat. That means God punishes Adam that he's going to have to work hard for a living, right? Until you return to the ground. For from it you were taken, from dust you were taken, right? And you are, and to dust you shall return, right? We all know it's a famous line that's brought not only in Judaism, it's the concept of dust to dust, right? It's a sort of the spiritual, the physical ecosystem, if you can call it that, right? That we come from dust. We know that in Genesis it says that Adam and Eve, they were created by God from the earth. In fact, the name Adam, does anyone know where the name Adam comes from? Adama, right? Because he came from the Adama, he came from the earth, right? And that's why the woman is really Adam 2.0, the upgraded version, right? Adam was created from dust, and Eve was created from another human being, right? So she's already like a little bit advanced level. She's not just dust, right? Yeah. Yeah. Huh? Move on. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you for saving me. I didn't even know where I was going. You know what I mean? Yeah. Thank you. But it's dust to dust, and huh? That's when they have to clean up their husband. He's the real dust. In the Kabbalah, it's brought down that man and woman, when they have relations, so in the very traditional way, the man is looking down, because that's where he comes from. He comes from the dust, so he looks down, and the woman looks up, because she looks up to the heavens. She looks up to the higher space. She looks up to where she came from, because she comes from man. So it's sort of a spiritual kind of. Everyone goes back to where they came from, but we know that as Jews, it's a very, very beginning of Genesis, and this has always been Jewish tradition, very much engraved in that, is that we come from dust and we go to dust. The very first Jew was who? Avraham, right? Who was the first Jewess? Sarah. And in this week's parsha, everything happens to be this week's parsha, right? Every rabbi you meet, so he's this week. It happens to be this week's parsha is called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. It's not about the life of Sarah, ironically. It's about her passing, right? And it says that when Sarah passed away, Adam was adamant that and Abraham was adamant that she be buried in a proper burial place, honorable burial place. And so there's a whole story in the Torah about how Abraham goes to the children of Chet, and he goes and he buys the Ma'arat Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah, in which he buried his wife Sarah. Eventually, in that very same place, Yitzchak and Abraham and Sarah buried there, then Isaac and Rebekah buried there, and eventually Leah and Jacob are buried there, right? Some say traditionally that there was a tradition that in that place Adam and Eve were also buried, and that's why Abraham was so adamant to buy that place, because there was already there was a grandparent that was there in that place. But that's more of a tradition. But we know that if you go there till this very day, you'll see over there the burial places of the patriarchs. But he wasn't just interested in having the place; he wanted that place should never be contested, and hence the tradition that Jewish people buy a plot. They always make sure they belong to a shul that has a cemetery. Make sure to have a piece of land to be buried, and so it's considered a segula, a good omen for long life if you make sure that you have a plot. Yeah, that's where my name Plotkin comes from. Tell you about it. The plot king. Yeah. Anyways, today we have a lot of corny jokes, and it's okay. It's okay. You could have the corny jokes once in a while. So we see that it's ironic actually that the places there are three places in the Torah that are most contested today in Israel, and those are the three places that we actually have contracts, written documents in the Torah that say that we bought that place. What are the three places in the Bible? The three places in Israel that are most contested are Jerusalem, which King David bought, and there's a whole section of the Torah in the Tanakh about how King David bought that place for the temple, Jerusalem, right? The Har Moriah, the Mount Moriah, the place where that was bought. There actually is there's no better contract than the Bible, the most popular book for thousands of years in the world, right? Everyone knew about that sale, and that sale is most contested. The second place is Hebron, which is the cave of Machpelah, And the third place, it speaks about in a few parshas from now, that Jacob bought the land, the city of Shechem. Shechem is Nablus. Okay, Nablus is also a hotbed for all kinds of things that are going on there, where Joseph, the tomb of Joseph today, and by the way, Joseph also asked to be buried in Israel, in a piece of land, because the pharaohs, they were mummified, or they were put at the bottom of the Nile River, and Jacob, before he dies, Jacob being the third patriarch, he tells his son, I want to be buried. I don't want to go like the Egyptians are going here. I don't want to be a mummy. I want to be buried in a proper Jewish burial, dust to dust, back to the earth. Please bury me back in the burial place of my parents and grandparents. And he makes Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt, swear to him before he dies. The last thing he asks him to do is that he promises him that he will bury him back in Israel. Okay, so that's quite an interesting concept that's going on over here. And then his son Joseph also is taken with the Jewish people. When Moses leaves Egypt, he takes Joseph and he puts him he brings him in a casket, and he carries him for 40 years. As the Jews wandered through the wilderness, they carried the tomb, the bones of Joseph, it's called. And they carried him all the way to where he's buried eventually 40 years later. When the Jews come into Israel, he's buried in Shechem and Nablus. But for 40 years, they had the Ark of the Covenant, was one box with the Torah in it and the Ten Commandments in it. And it says the Talmud that there were two boxes that were being carried by the Jews. One was the Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments in it. The other box that was being carried, the other coffin was being carried, was the coffin of Joseph. And to honor the promise to him that he'd be buried in a Jewish burial, they carried him in the wilderness for 40 years. Could you imagine? And there's stories about people that were carrying his body, and they were impure, and they couldn't eat from the Paschal lamb in the first year while they were wandering in the wilderness, because they were carrying, and they came to God and they said, "Why? It's unfair. We're doing the ultimate kindness, carrying Joseph's bones." So we see again how Jewish burial in the ground is something that is so. It's something that has been part of our traditions of what we're all about. And finally, Moses himself. Moses, the Torah tells us, was buried by God in just on the other side of the Jordan River. And it says that no one knows the burial place of Moses till this very day. If you give a look over here at in the third, Devarim, Deuteronomy 34:6, right? God buried him in the valley of the land of Moab near Beit Peor, and no one knows his burial place to today. So, and it's brought down in the commentaries why wasn't they didn't want to God and Moses, they didn't want to make an idolatrous place out of it, because Moses was such a great person that they kept it a secret as to where he's buried. So he should be somewhere on the other side of the river. There are very, very clear markers of where it is, but we still don't know where it is. It's in the land of Moab, in Gai, opposite Beit Peor. So there are a lot of landmarks here of where it is, but we still don't know where it is this very day. I remember I was going with Goldie after we got married, and we're going with a tour guide in Israel. You know, tour guides in Israel, they sell you the moon, right? So the worst thing they hate is if a rabbi is with them on the tour. You know, he might know a little bit more. So this guy is going on and on. He's talking to the crowd, and they're lapping up every word he's telling them. He's telling them, you see, right over here, this is approximately where Moses was buried, in this spot right over here in Israel. And I'm saying, I don't know, I thought I read the Bible. It says that nobody knows where he's buried to this day. Nobody besides for the tour guide. He knows exactly where Moses is buried. And And I said to him, how could you tell the people Moses is buried here? We know he's buried on the other side of the Jordan River, and nobody knows where he is. He said, "Shh, Rabbi, please, quiet. It's a business. Don't ruin it for me." I remember he was a funny guy. He says, "Don't ruin it for me." Yeah, so you know. Okay, so you know. Yeah, anyway, so that's the story. That's the story with the tour guides. But you see over here again that not only was he buried, but God buried him. So God buried him. That means the burial is so significant that Hashem Himself, the God, the Almighty God, He performed the mitzvah of burial Himself. Right? That's very hard. I mean, sometimes people, today it's quite a big thing to lots of people believe in cremation, and it could be for financial reasons. Some people do it. It happens to be a little bit cheaper. It's not a lot cheaper, but it's a little cheaper. And some people think that environmentally, it's better, so they decide to do it. It's not really true that it's environmentally better because you might if I don't know if you know how much fumes are going out into the universe with the how much carbon is going out there, pollution with the burning of the bones. But be as that may, I'm not gonna go into so much what everyone's reason is. I think did I mention the reason the other week? About someone in the community that he I mentioned that story, about the guy that wanted to, because he was afraid, he was worried about being underground. Yeah? So I told him I'd far more want to be stuck underground than to be caught in the oven. It's huh? The conveyor belt on the way. Oh, so you remember my story? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, whatever.
Are the ashes, like, it curls my toes to think that people walk around with the ashes or where they put them.
Right.
I know somebody who was recently cremated, and his very long-term girlfriend, he wasn't Jewish, had to deal with, she's Jewish, and she had to deal with the ashes, and she found it traumatic.
It is very traumatic, because what do you do with it? It's like when you move, you always have to think where's daddy or where's whatever, you know what I mean? Like, oh, where's then you have a few of these urns, and you don't know what to do with them. We've had people buried under the bridge and under there. They put the ashes here and there. Yeah, it is quite traumatic to try to remember to make sure that you have the ashes in the right place, and there's always you could scatter it. You could scatter it in the shopping mall if you want, or it is okay. Yeah. On the mantelpiece, yeah, it is a thing, right. By the mantelpiece, you watch the movies, you watch the Oscars, and you move, and then Zadie is in the way, so you move him aside because he's in the way of the Oscars. You know what I mean? And you put the popcorn for the football game right over there, yeah, and the whiskey glass right next to it. Anyways, whatever. I'm not trying to make fun of people who do it. I mean, you can make fun of other things too as well. That's not the reason. The reason why we as Jews, we do it because there is it's a clear directive of the Torah to be buried, and if you believe in that, that's the belief, right? Now, if you look at the footnote number 3, footnote number 2, you'll see actually the origins. Now, until now, we've spoken about the tradition of burying, how deep it is, and how many generations it goes back. The Jews buried other Jews, and when they passed away. But the actual commandment of burying is taken from a sinner, a criminal. Actually, that's where it's written. The Torah speaks about a person that has been put to death with the death penalty in the olden days, right, for certain capital crimes. And if the person was put to death, it says that even if the person was a murderer or whatever it was, right, you should not embarrass, you should not bring shame to the person and their family by leaving the body overnight. And it says that you shall not hang it overnight or leave it overnight, right? But rather it says you shall definitely bury the body right away. So we're talking about even a person that is considered a murderer or some terrible sinner. And by the way, in Judaism there was the capital punishment, but it only happened once in 70 years. The Talmud says that you had to have someone that was such a murderer, such a sinner, that it was clear like the day that the person had committed the crime. If there was any doubt whatsoever. And in Jewish law, you had to have two witnesses, and the witnesses had to be their witness had to reconcile exactly 100%. And if there was even one question, one doubt, the person was not put to death. So someone that was put to death in Jewish tradition was someone who was really bad. Okay, so even that person, the Torah says, don't desecrate the body, don't desecrate the human being. Even the imperfect person should not be desecrated by leaving his body overnight and by bringing shame to the person, to his body, to his soul, by leaving it overnight, and you shall surely bury the person. So from there we see that the Torah believes that every single person, even the sinners of Israel, deserve a proper burial. And we know by Jews always, the burial society was the center of the Jewish community. There was always a group called the Chevre Kadisha, which many of you know that the group, and their job was to make sure that every person has a burial. And this was something that came even before synagogue life, was the Chevre Kadisha. And many of you might know from when you were young that there was a burial society. And people used to be going. I'm talking about, because that's 50 years ago. But going back like 200-300 years ago in the shtetl, the Chevre Kadisha, they ran the community, the burial society. Believe it or not, they were in charge of the whole community. All the other communal programs, including helping the poor and the sick and visiting the sick and all of that all went through the channel of the Chevre Kadisha. I know in South Africa and in England they also have a lot of that in places where there are established Jewish communities. So this was always a very, very, very important thing. Now it's brought down that, you know, when we do the benching, there's 4 blessings in the benching. In the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals. It says that you'll see there's 4 paragraphs. Okay, so the first paragraph, it says, was written by Moses himself. When the Jews were wandering in the wilderness and they were eating the manna, so Moses made the first paragraph, which ends with Baruch atah Hashem hazanat hakol. The next paragraph, when the Jews entered Israel, al haaretz hatova, on the good land, al haaretz ve'al hamazon, that was written by Joshua, the second paragraph of the Birkat, of the benching. The third paragraph of the grace after meals was Bonei Berachama B'Yerushalayim Amen, the building of Jerusalem. That's already when the Jews were now in their own land, but they were secure and they had a temple, and they were like a light unto the nations. But then there is the fourth blessing, which comes afterwards, which starts with Baruch atah Hashem, Hu heitiv lanu, Hu meitiv lanu, Hu yetiv lanu, Hu gam lanu, Hu gam leinu. The blessing about God being good to us. Now, where did that fourth blessing come from? And many people don't know. This is brought in the Talmud, that the fourth blessing was made in the benching in association with after the second temple was destroyed. We all know that one of the most tragic times in Jewish history was when the second temple was destroyed, and the Romans, they came in and they decimated the Jewish community. But then there was a group of bandits, and a group of courageous Jews that actually the modern state of Israel, they they used them as the modern day heroes. There was a group of soldiers, a group of yeshiva students. Many of them were the students of Rabbi Akiva, and they banded behind a fellow named Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba means the son of the star, and he was like a king amongst the Jews, and they started rebelling against the Romans who were oppressing them, and after a while they were very, very successful, and they were so successful that Rome had to send in all the reinforcements to come to Jerusalem, because there's this little group of Jewish yeshiva boys. They started to make this rebellion and wanted to bring back Israel. And they say, Rabbi Akiva even at some point thought that maybe Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach, which was brought in the scriptures. But unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. And what seemed to be the Mashiach turned out to be one of the most tragic times in Jewish history. And the last fortress of Bar Kokhba was a place called Beitar. And in this place, Beitar, the Romans surrounded them, and they had a siege for a very long time. And they finally, they just came in and they killed everyone. And for 2 years, the Romans kept the bodies of the Jews. There's nothing new in that region. For 2 years, they wouldn't release the bodies for burial. Yeah. So the people were begging, please, they're asking the Romans, at least let us have closure. Let us take the bodies back for burial. Something like what's going on right now in Israel. Yeah? Nothing new under the sun. And when they were finally released, these bodies for burial, that's when they made the fourth blessing of the Birkat HaMazon, that God was good. The Jews said God is good, that we can bury our dead. 2 years they couldn't bury the dead. They finally were able to bury the dead. They made a bracha at the end, because there was also a great miracle associated with it. They say that the bodies were not decomposed, and they were all there in perfect, they had an opportunity to identify the bodies and to bring closure to all these families that couldn't bury their loved ones. So we see a whole bracha about the burial of Jews in the benching, which every child and everyone benches, and all the camps and everything, and they bench out loud, and they sing, God is good. What is the God is good? This bracha was made because we were thanking God for the opportunity to bury our dead. So we see how engraved this concept of Jewish burial is part and parcel of the Jewish people. Now, how much do you pay for a plot? How much do we as Jews pay for a plot? Now today, if you go to Pardes Shalom or Pardes Chaim, it's not cheap. It's about $3,500, I think, the plot. That's what it costs. Huh? That's cheap, right? Now, if you want to get into a certain cemetery, if you want to get into a certain place,
I saw today in the paper.
Yeah.
Someone was selling a plot in Highway Gardens, which is just down the road, from us.
Oh. How much?
Highland Gardens.
How much?
$11,000.
11,000. Okay. So yeah. So no. So there are places in Toronto which is like highly desired places, like the one near the post office at Bathurst and Steeles over there. You can get. It's more or less. There's not too many places left, but they have a few places left, like for $20,000. Okay. But I'm going to tell you about an interesting story that happened in Israel. There's a very famous halachic authority that many people come to ask questions of. His name is Rabbi Zilberstein, and he has many. He's a very, very beautiful writer also, and he writes different halachic questions. And if you ever want to read something, they have actually some pieces from him in English as well. But he's primarily in Hebrew. He lives in Israel, and he comes up with original halachic. Jewish law issues, and so a question was brought to him. What was the question? During the Holocaust, there was a couple with a child. They lived somewhere in Eastern Europe, and the Nazis came in and they took the wife away and they murdered her. And the husband and the son. They survived, And how did they survive? They had a neighbor, a nice Gentile woman that lived over there not far from them. And they went into her house, and she was a widow. And the husband came in, and he made believe that he was her husband, and there was their child. And for the next 4 years, they were able to fool the Nazis into thinking that this Jewish people were. Now, you know what happens, a guy and a girl in the same house for 4 years. So eventually he fell in love with her, and he married her. He married the Gentile woman. She saved his life as well. And she married him, and they had another child. The two of them had a child. So now, after the war, this couple moved to the States, the United States of America somewhere, and there were the two children, right? They were half brothers, right? There. So the one half brother, one was Jewish from the first marriage, and from the second marriage was not Jewish, right? Because the mother wasn't Jewish. So they basically lived like a non-Jewish kind of life in the States. The older brother decided to move to Israel, and he moved to Jerusalem, and he went to yeshiva, and he became a bit of a rabbi, and so he didn't have much of a connection with his family in the States. Anyways, a couple of years ago, he gets news that his father had passed away. This fellow in Jerusalem his father passed away, and the father left over $50 million. Yeah. So the brother came to him. The brother from the States came to the brother from Israel and said, "Look, we have the $50 million. Let's make it easy. Let's just divide it. 25 million for me, 25 million for you, and everybody will live happily ever after." But the brother said, "Okay, no problem." The religious brother said, "But how are we? Where is Dad going to be buried? I'd like to have him buried over here in Israel, amongst the Jewish people, or in a Jewish cemetery." He says, no. He says, the half-brother says, "My mother has passed away already, and she's buried somewhere in the States, and they bought 2 plots, and I want Dad to be buried with Mom. After all, she's the one that saved us all." Right? So that was the story. And this brother said, but I want my dad to have a Jewish burial in a Jewish cemetery. So there was this whole to do, and they went to court about it. They went to court about it, and the judge, smart judge, what did the judge say? The judge said, "You know what? I'm judging that we should we're going to cremate your father, and then 50% will go to you, 50% you. You can have one in one urn, one in another." So that's a smart judge, right? So that's it. Huh? The wisdom of King Solomon. So now this fellow in Jerusalem, this rabbi, sort of rabbi in Jerusalem, went to this Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, who says many, and he says, "What should I do?" So he said, "Why don't you offer some of the money to your brother? Maybe if you give him some of the money from the inheritance, some more money from the inheritance, maybe he'll agree to let your dad be buried in a Jewish cemetery." So he went to him and he said, "I'll give you another $10,000, another $20,000. She says, "No, I'm not prepared." So he says, "How much would you be prepared for anything?" He says, "Yeah, I'd be prepared if you give me your $25 million. The other your $25 million, you pay me that, then Dad can be buried in a Jewish cemetery." So he came to Zilberstein, Rabbi Zilberstein, and he asked him, "What do you say, Rabbi?" So the rabbi said, "I think you should pay the $25 million for the plot, for the possibility of burying your dad, giving him proper burial." And it was sort of a controversial ruling. And the other rabbis asked, well, what kind of thing is this? Why should he give up his $25 million? It's not even fair. Like, why? You know what I mean? For $100,000, okay, but for $25 million? The rabbi said, yeah, because according to Jewish law, the money for the funeral comes before the division of the assets. So you have to first pay for the funeral, and only after that can you divide the assets. You have to make sure if there's any money, it has to go. And since the only way you can give him a Jewish burial is by paying $25 million, so that's taken away before you. Obviously, he went to another rabbi. Another ruling. No. But anyways, I just wanted to tell you how precious Jewish burial is. And the rabbi said, $25 million you should pay. You should be prepared to pay $25 million to give your father a proper Jewish burial. So that's that story. So now the piece that I have on the bottom in Brachas 24b 48b is really, that's the piece that I just told you before about the blessing. Who is good and does good. That was in Beitar. And you can read it later on your own time. You'll read it. It's a long little piece. That's where it comes from. But the truth is, why are we why is the Torah so worried about the body? And that is because we believe as Jews that the body, most people think that what's important just is the soul. Most people think that after you die, all that's important is the soul. The body was just a vessel for the soul for 70, 80, 120 years. And the body is just a coincidental thing for the soul to do whatever it has to do in this world. Now, when the person dies, that's it, it's over, it's ois yontif, and it's finished. And now, the main thing is Torah holds differently. Torah holds that the body of the human being was created God fashioned it from the dust of the earth. And if you look carefully, it says that God created man in his image. So the body is not just a random hodgepodge of a bunch of different cells that come together to serve the purpose in life, to serve the soul. No. The body is holy in Jewish law. And as we spoke about it at great length in the first and second classes, that a body is not, we have to treat it with honor and dignity. It belongs to God. But more than that, it's in the image of God. Now, as Jews, we know that there's no such thing as an image of God. God has no image. The Torah itself says that you shall have you shall not worship an image. But when we say it's in the image of God, meaning that the genius of the human body, and as we all know, there's an incredible genius in the human body. Anyone that knows a little bit science, the first thing about how many things, cells and parts of the person have to work in total to be totally in sync. And there's one bracha that every morning we have when we wake up in the morning. One of the most beautiful blessings is a bracha that you say in the morning called Asher Yotzer. Asher Yotzer, it's a blessing that you're supposed to say, in fact, after you go to the washroom. And it speaks about how God created the body with such genius, and that God would to shut any orifice of the body, even for one moment, we couldn't exist. Right? How perfect the body is, and that is our belief, is that not only the soul is from God, but the body is from God, and that's why Jews, when a person passes away, we have a funeral. We go to the cemetery. And we escort the body. It's not even the soul, it's the body. We carry it in a box, and we give it such honor and dignity. The Chevra Kadisha is not allowed to speak when they wash the body. It has to be so perfect, and they have to be careful not to say any jokes while they're washing the body. And it's considered like it's like an expression of God. It's God's handiwork. And there's an interesting letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he wrote to somebody. They asked the Rebbe about cremation. And a young man said, "What can I tell my father about it?" So the Rebbe says, "You should tell your father that don't think life We spoke last time about that life ends, at when you with maid, and and life ends at the very end when a person dies. That's when it's over. That's when it's finished. And sometimes we don't do heroics to save a person, right? When it's mamish at the very, very end. But there's still life, and that life has to be honored. And the Rebbe writes over there that even after the body is put into the grave, there still is some life. It's not conscious life, but until the body is not disintegrated, there still is a remnant of the soul that exists in the body. It's the lowest level of life. It's like the life of a vegetable or the life of a rock. It's a very, very simple level of life, but it's your life that still continues and the way God wants it to be is that you should return back to the ecosystem. And when you bury, it's like, so the Jewish belief is that one day there's going to be Tchiyat HaMesim, the revival of the dead, right? And that one day, and that's one of the reasons why burial is very important, because it's our belief that one day we will come back to life, not just the soul, but also the body, and that a little piece of the body is never destroyed, and from that piece of the body that remains, you understand where the ideas from Steven Spielberg comes in Jurassic Park. If you just take a little clone, a little piece, a little something, a little cell from the body, you can rebuild the body again. But anyways, be as that may, the Jewish tradition has always been that one day life will come back. So you have to view it when you bury someone, and I think this is a very beautiful way of looking at it. I know some people feel like they feel a little queasy about it, and especially you go to a cemetery, you lower the body and it goes into the ground, and it's like cold and the worms and the this, and like a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with it. But you have to look at it. If you look at it this way, you'll never look at it the same. It's like you take a seed and you plant it. Right? You take a seed and you plant. The seed falls apart to pieces, and then eventually from the seed comes forth a new life. And so God wanted us to be sort of replanted in the earth that we come from, and we were placed back into the ground, and from there life is put back to where it comes from, and it becomes part again of Mother Earth, so to speak, right? I mean, these are a lot of hard spiritual concepts, but as Jews we believe that there is in fact, someone mentioned before, there is a part of the body that does not decompose and always remains, and it's called the etzem luz. It's a bone on top of the spine. That this bone, from this bone, it says God will one day rebuild the body again, and will come back to life through that. So there's a part of us that's never totally destroyed, and from that life comes back again. Okay, but be as that may, and that's another subject in the spiritual and the Kabbalah subjects. And we can talk about it another time. But what's important to know over here is that there is still a little bit life that continues the further, and you don't want to just stop life and burn it. And when you burn it, you bring it to an end. Now, for many Jews, and I'm not saying this is the reason why a person shouldn't go to a crematorium and go to cremation, but in the last generation, for Jews living through the horrors of the Nazis, etc., we all know that the Jews that were killed in the concentration camps and in the gas chambers, their bodies were taken afterwards and put into a crematorium, very similar to what we have today in the crematoriums. There's no difference. So for Jews, that's just another point. It's not something that's not the main reason why Jews don't do it, but it's also something that something to think about. That we don't want to live through the same thing again, and we don't want to. Another very important point is you want to have a place where the family could come and daven, and have a place where they can make a connection. And also, I mean, of course, there is a connection that we spoke about before on the mantle, but that's what you if you cremation. But we know that from a religious point of view, the place of the burial is considered a very important place to visit. And yeah, go ahead.
It's a very personal matter, and for me, it happened with my brother.
Right.
He decided long ago that he didn't want to be buried.
Right.
And he was very ill and he passed away. His daughter tried to dissuade him at the last minute to be buried, but he didn't. And she called me to tell me the final funeral arrangements, and she said it's whatever the time was at Benjamin's.
Right.
So I said, oh, did he change his mind at the last minute? And I said, no, Benjamin's do cremations. And the point is that now he was cremated, and the ashes are with his widow or daughter, I don't know where, and that yearning to find somebody sometime to go and sit and talk and like we do at the cemetery.
Yeah, you don't have that.
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
That is the worst part.
So a cremated, cremains as they're called,
But
the cremains cannot be buried.
okay, so it's a good question. That's a halachic question of what we can do. What is the right thing to do if you end up with it? So for sure, the cremains of the Jews of the Holocaust, or someone who was cremated against their wishes, right? For sure, you can give them a burial, okay? And they bury them in the Jewish cemetery in those situations. However, there is amongst the sages there was a ruling many years ago that in order to discourage people from cremating, right, that they disallow them, they don't allow them to be buried in the Jewish cemetery, because you shouldn't have the pie and eat it too kind of thing, right? If you're choosing to be cremated, you shouldn't be buried as now. They have some places where they can do it outside of the cemetery. I don't know if it's here in Toronto, but in some other places they have opportunity to do it like outside of the boundaries of the cemetery. So at least there's a place where they can go to, like you said before, where the ashes, where the remains can be placed. Now it's probably the right thing to do is probably to bury it. Why? Even though Jewish tradition didn't facilitate it, but you're not allowed to have any benefit from something which the Torah says must be buried. Anything in the Torah that says must be buried, you're not allowed. If you do burn it, you're not allowed to have any benefit from the remains. So you still have to bury whatever is left over. But like I said, there was another ruling amongst the sages not to allow it in the Jewish cemeteries. But the family themselves should probably, the right thing probably to do is to bury it somewhere, right? Wherever. That's not something to do, but that's probably the right thing to do. Now, I just want to say, yeah, go ahead.
I'm a little confused here. If you were not allowed to cremate,
Right.
why did Benjamin be part of it? It's like going to a butcher, and they're also.
I don't want to speak about Benjamins on the public forum over here because they can sue me. But they facilitate it because they are a business, and there are many Jewish people that choose to do it. So they mostly don't allow for it, but they will facilitate if a family chooses to do that.
Will the rabbi be part of the cremation?
No, of course not. Of course not. Unless the rabbi is not, very, very religious,
Is there a reform cemetery anywhere?
Of course, Reform cemetery for sure. No, if you go to like Pardes Shalom or Pardes Chaim, you'll see there's Orthodox sections, conservative, Reform.
Part of,
Yeah.
right,
Right. But they don't allow, even in the Reform section, they don't allow for the ashes of the cremation to be buried in the cemetery has that as a policy. All Jewish cemeteries generally all have that as a policy because in order not to encourage cremation. Yeah, go ahead.
Our question in the event of cremation, what is its halakha in terms of sitting shiva or saying kaddish?
You should reach out to a competent rabbi about it, but there are certain things that we do and certain things that we don't do. There are some very, very clear halachas regarding mourning. So for the mourning period, kaddish still should be said for that soul, but there are many rulings about that the shiva is not given because the shiva is sort of an honor for that person, and so we don't sit shiva for a person like that. Yeah, that's right. As there was a ruling many years ago that for a person that commits suicide or things like that they wouldn't sit shiva for that person as well. But every case, like I said, every case has to be judged separately, independently. Now we have to understand that in today's day and age, many people are not educated in this subject. Many people grow up in secular homes, and so they don't know better. They don't know what the Jewish way is. They grew up with their parents were cremated before them, so we have to judge these people favorably. In other words, we can't stand in judgment of them because in this generation it's almost like it's a concept in halacha called like being brought up in captivity. Someone that's brought up in captivity, you can't hold it against them. So since we live in a secular society where secular values are king, so therefore we judge people in that light. So yeah, that's why you asked me the question whether you sit shiva, whether you do kaddish, you do all these things. From a very, very pure halachic point, we don't do any of those things, but at the end of the day, we do say kaddish, we do many other things because we believe that many people today didn't really have the right tools to make the choice, and that's why they should be judged favorably. So that's why in each individual case, one should speak to a rabbi and see how that should be done. I'm going to get back to some of the questions afterwards. Does anyone have a time here? I can't even see what time it is. Okay, we're fine. So I just want to share with you a story about a rabbi in New York. He was Rabbi Stephen Anon. He lived in a place called Deal, New Jersey. And his family, he had lots of family in Brooklyn. And so they were driving to Brooklyn. And as he was going through Brooklyn, they see a sign for Staten Island. And it was not long before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So he told his wife, he says, our parents are buried in the cemetery in Staten Island. So let's go over and see if we can go say some prayers before the high holidays. If it's okay with you, because we have another hour or two extra time. So let's go to the cemetery. So they agreed to go to the cemetery. So just out of the blue, they just decided to go to the cemetery in Staten Island. And then as soon as they arrived, they're coming to their parents to make the prayers. There's a hearse that's rushes right past them, near where they were. And as usual, there was only 9 people for the minyan. So someone taps this Rabbi Anon on the shoulder, and he says, maybe you can help us out for the minyan. She says, sure, I'm here, Hashem sent me here, so I wasn't even planning on coming here. So I'll come to the, so he goes, and then they're burying this guy. There's only 9 people, so he goes there, and they say Kaddish, and he says, Omen Yeheshmei Rabba, and he feels really good. But then when they're finished, he asked them, they were like little, maybe a conservative, reform, or whatever, they weren't very religious people. And he asked them, maybe whose burying, like the nuns. We don't do that. In our community, we just place a green thing on top of it, and we don't bury the body. The guy in the tractor will do it, afterwards. So he's a religious rabbi. He says, how can you leave the person behind? Not even a few shovels of earth? What's going on? The Jews. Anyways, they all left. And he went over to the guy with the tractor, and he goes over to him and he says, you know what? Here's a couple of dollars. I'm going to fill up the grave. So this rabbi, he was a young, strapping guy. He got to work and he started to fill the grave himself. It took him an hour and a half, and his family was waiting with his kids and his wife and the kids and were waiting. But he did the whole thing himself. Can you imagine? A guy single-handedly, he did all because he felt that he owed it to this person whom he never met before, right? To make sure, because he knew that Jews, the mitzvah is, thou shalt surely bury. So the mitzvah is to do the... But then we went home afterwards, and something was bothering him. He was saying, like, why did I end up here, and why was I so obsessed with digging the whole grave myself? So he felt like he was trying to find it. So he found out the name of the person that this funeral was for, and it didn't ring a bell at all. It didn't ring a bell. Like, who was this person? So he called up one of his mentors. He had a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Herman Neuberger, a rabbi from the Ner Israel. There's a yeshiva here, Ner Israel, here in Toronto. There's another Ner Israel in Baltimore. So this guy was from the founders of Ner Israel. He was there for 50 years. And this young boy, he studied, this Rabbi Stephen, he studied in that yeshiva. So he thought he'll call up his rabbi and ask him about... So he asked him. He asked the rabbi. The rabbi said, "What's the name of the person? What was the name of this guy, the person that you buried?" So he said the name of a person, and suddenly he hears on the other side, the rabbi is like, the phone goes quiet, and he hears like breathing, and a few minutes later he asks the rabbi, "What happened?" He says, "You won't believe who you just buried." He says, "You were a young boy from Seattle. And your father, when you were about 13 years old, there was no yeshiva in Seattle, no Jewish day school even in Seattle at the time. So he decided to send you to a yeshiva in Baltimore. And you came to the yeshiva in Baltimore, and I was in charge. I was the administrator of the yeshiva, as Neuberger said. I ran the yeshiva, and you came here, and your father gave a deposit. And then after a few months, your father calls me up and says, I'm sorry, but my business, I lost everything, and I can't pay any more for the tuition. And most people can't pay for tuition on a good day. But this is like I lost everything. I can't. So I told your father, I said, you know what? I feel really bad for you. I'm going to see if I can find somebody, a sponsor for your son. If I can find a sponsor for your son, I'll let you know. And he went around and he said, this Rabbi Neuberger said, I called this one and that one, and I finally got a hold of a person. And that person was your sponsor. This person. So the rabbi says, who is this person? Why are you telling me about it? I'd love to thank this person. He says, that was the person that you buried, was the person that you sponsored. It's a real story. I looked it up. This was the person that you were the one that completed the burial, was the person that sponsored you for 4 years in high school. You went to school because of this fellow. And the last gift that your sponsor gave you was a lesson in Jewish life, how you have to help another person when they're down and out and there isn't a minyan. You came to help him with the minyan, and not only that, he gave you the final lesson of the mitzvah of burial, which is considered the greatest kindness you can give to someone, because it says in the Torah that the greatest kindness is when you do something for the dead, because it's a kindness that there's no ulterior motive, that you're doing just because. And in this case, it was just because nobody saw it, nobody would ever know about it. It was only the dead person, Rabbi Stephen, and Hashem. That's all that were there. And he did it. This is an incredible story, and it seems like it's accurate. And anyways, getting back to our original question in this in the class was the ethical question, right? What do we do if somebody instructs us and we are the trustee, right? We are entrusted by them to do it, and it's against our ideals. There's another story. There was a rabbi during the Holocaust. His name was Rabbi Ephraim Oshri. He wrote a book about questions the Jews gave of the Holocaust. In fact, it's a South African family. It's Hilton Redding. It's that family over there. It's his uncle or something. Rabbi Ephraim Oshri. Okay, so there's connections to the family to South Africa, right? So this is Rabbi Ephraim Oshri. Huh? He was your rabbi, yeah? Okay, so he wrote a book. It's called From the Depths. It's questions and answers of things that he answered. He was a rabbi during the Holocaust, and questions that people came to him and asked him, like very, very hard questions when you're like, 6 million people are dying. They're asking all kinds of things. How do we keep our so this question was about a fellow that was for whatever reason he worked with the SS, a Jewish fellow, that in order to live, he was a German, and he somehow was able to smuggle himself, and he wasn't the guy that was killing the Jews, but he was Jewish, and he was in the German army during World War II, and he passed away. And they asked him the question. They asked the rabbi the question as to whether he should be buried in the German army cemetery, because that's what they were telling him to do, or and if he'd be buried there, he'd be buried with honors and everything, but it will be with the crosses and with the whole thing of the German army that will be surrounding him, or he has to, or he had no money or anything like that. He had no family. So whether or not people should try to get this person to be buried in a Jewish cemetery or not. So the rabbi said that of course, I mean it's a no-brainer, even though he would be no, I'm sorry. The choice was either to be buried in the German cemetery, or they gave you an option to be cremated. That's what it was. So the question was whether he should be cremated, and that way he won't be in this cemetery with the crosses and everything in the Gentile cemetery, or or either he should be buried in the Gentile cemetery, or he should be cremated. So the rabbi said cremated is out of the question. He says even if it means that you'll be buried in this. So now recently I think they moved that body. You're saying it was a famous case, because I heard like a few years ago about somebody that wanted to be moved from the German cemetery to another cemetery. But at that point in time, when the rabbi was asked the question, should he rather be buried in the Gentile cemetery or be cremated? And the rabbi said, even if it's in a German cemetery, it's better than being cremated, even if that's the choice. So getting back to our question. So you're the trustee. By the way, I want to tell you, I'm going to pass it around soon to let you know it's an interesting law. So you have the Canadian Ontario law to deal with, right? That's one of the things you need to deal with if you're a trustee. And so the guy is saying in his last will and testament, he's telling you, I want to be cremated. But you should know that Ontario law is that you don't have to listen. If it's against your beliefs, you don't need to listen to the instructions. There are 3 conditions that a trustee must do. He must inform the next in kin as to what his decision is. He has to make sure that it's that the body is disposed of in what's called an honorable way, and the third condition is that you're not doing a funeral that is way more than how the person lived. In other words, if you lived a humble life, so he should be buried in a humble way. But if you live in an extravagant way, you can pay a lot of money for a funeral. So that's sort of what a trustee has to keep in mind. But a trustee can decide. It's up to the trustee to decide whether or not. So that's as far as the Ontario law goes. Now the second question is, and obviously for us the more important question is, do we have to listen to a parent? Because kibbud avayim, you have to listen to what your parent has to say. Now if it goes contrary to your beliefs, for you to do that, or to be party of it, or to be involved in it, halacha says that, let's say a parent tells a child to do something what they believe is morally wrong, right? Or what Judaism believes is morally wrong. You don't have to listen to a parent, even if it's kibbud avayim. So if a parent says, I want you to eat some piece of chazer, right? The parent says, I'm telling you, I'm your father. I'm telling you to eat. You don't have to listen. That Judaism says that you don't have, or if the parent tells you to do something which is to steal, or to do something which is morally questionable, you don't have to listen to parents. So there are caveats, there are limitations to honoring a parent. So even if the parent tells you to do something, if you don't feel comfortable with doing it, you don't have to do it. The question is, many times there are always a few children, and there are a few kids, and so there'll always be one child that will say, we need to do what daddy said, or mommy said, and that's where it becomes very complicated. But about the individual person does not have to listen to a parent. That's what the halacha says. If you feel that is morally questionable, that we don't, and so that's basically the way the Jewish law goes, is that you do not have to, and plus you have also here the law that the Ontario law does not force the trustee to do it, because the instructions of a dead person for his finances, that's one thing. But other things for the trustee to do, a deceased person doesn't have a hold on a living person. Okay, so you can't put something on a living person. I'm just saying that's and I have over here some papers here. You can see the ruling. If you want to see the ruling about the Ontario law, if you're interested in it. You're a doctor, you're not interested. The lawyer will be interested. Yeah, I can pass it around. Yeah, I can pass it around. That's the law. But I mean, for us, the big question is the moral question, the moral issue. And it's look, I wouldn't want to be put into that position. It's a very, very hard thing to deal with, and I know that a lot of people have a hard time dealing with it. So I'm not. You know what I mean? Every case has to be dealt with individually. But as far as the law of listening, honoring a father or mother, as an individual person, you don't have to listen to a parent if your parent is asking you to do something that's unconscionable for you, that's not acceptable to your lifestyle. You don't have to listen and these kind of things. So that's my answer in short. Anybody have any more questions on this subject? Yeah, go ahead.
Just going back to the ancient world.
Yeah.
Was it common practice, the Egyptians aside, for cremation?
There's a lot of cremation. The Indians in the Indian culture, they send off they put them on a boat and they burn them. That's a very, very primitive kind of a cremation. Today's cremation, they have it all worked down to. Yeah. Now we were speaking before about the loose bone, right? So we said that there's a bone that's never destroyed, and from that God is going to rebuild the body in the revival of the dead. The question is, when the person is cremated, does that bone still remain? Now, initially, by the way, when they cremate a person, there's many bones left over. Okay, I think the pelvic bone and other bones, they remain after a cremation. But then they have another machine that comes in afterwards. It's a fancy machine, It's basically a grinder. Okay, so that's. I want you to know. Cremation. It sounds like it's just you go into this. They cremate you, and then you come out just at. You don't just come out ashes. Okay. Ashes. I want you to know that in Jewish law, you see, there is no mitzvah to bury a person. It means as far as the mitzvah of burial only applies when there are full-blown parts. Like the tradition is that even if someone, let's say, has an amputation, they're supposed to, let's say, they lose a leg or whatever it is, you're supposed to bury that leg. That deems burial. But ashes doesn't really deem burial. The only reason why I say it's a mitzvah to bury it is because people are not allowed to have any benefit from the ashes, so that's why that would be a reason. But the mitzvah of burial really only applies, like a funeral, only applies. I remember in our community, by 9/11, we had one family, and there were two parents of a child who was on the plane, the Glazer family, Edmund Glazer. He was flying from Boston to Los Angeles, and unfortunately it was a detour, and he went into the second building of the. I remember at the time, we had to find his remains. And they couldn't find anything. So what they did was, I was part of that process. They had to take a little bit of the DNA, a swab from the mouth of the parents, and with that they were able to. Only about a year later, they found actually some enough that there was to have a funeral and a burial. And to have a full-blown funeral, they brought his remains back from ground zero. They brought him back over here to Toronto, and I remember the time the government of the United States of America, they sent him, and they paid the rabbi very handsomely for that, for the funeral. They paid for everything. They paid for all the funeral costs and everything. And they brought him in here, draped in an American flag, and he's buried in our.
Inscription is at the back of the parents'
Pats the parents' stone. Yeah. But there's also his actual stone is there's a stone for him over there because he's buried. He has his own plot, and he's buried in the shul cemetery. But I just want to tell you that that's how far the mitzvah of burial goes. That even remains. In that case, there was some cremation, but not by his choice. Obviously, it was not by his choice. So that's why we afford him with the complete honors and everything. And there was and because they had found some things, we were able to have a burial, a vaya, and the whole thing. So that's a story. So to talk about. So they do have in some ancient traditions.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of there's some prohibitions in the Torah because of don't do what
the ways of the goyim, right?
Do,
right, the ways of the idolaters.
Yeah.
So that some people say that's the reason why it's forbidden, which I didn't mention it, and it's good you bring that up. Another reason why cremation is forbidden because that was the ways of many of the idolatrous practices which Jews don't follow, and hence, especially where there is a very clear distinction that Jews, we always did burial in distinction to the other religions where they maybe had cremations and others. So that's part of following the ways of the Jews. Yeah.
Can I just ask you?
Yeah, question. Yeah.
You said that there has to be a certain amount to bury.
Right.
Who decides on how much?
You'd be surprised what halacha goes into. It tells exactly how much you need to find to be able to have a burial with a kaddish, with the whole thing, with the proper shiva and everything like that. There is it speaks about the spine, the skull, I mean things like that. I'm not going to go into but there are clear descriptions of what you need to have in order to have a Jewish funeral,
And if you don't have,
you still bury it, obviously. You still
but no,
no, yeah, there wouldn't be the shiva and all of that, right? Because it's go ahead.
I have a relative who was killed on October 7th, and his body has not been returned yet, but they had a shirt from his tank with his blood on it. And until the body is returned, they buried the shirt.
But they said shiva. But they said shiva.
They did say shiva.
They said shiva. Yeah, when you know he's dead and you don't have any idea when it's going to be returned, you sit shiva right away. Now it was very, very complicated in the case that we had because there are many other halachic questions because this fellow had a wife, and the question was whether she's allowed to get remarried because maybe he never made it onto the plane. We don't know for sure if he was on the plane. So in halacha, if you don't know for sure that he was there, she can't remarry because maybe he just sometimes you have people that choose to run away from life or whatever it is, right? So we don't know for sure. But in this case, he had called her about 2 minutes before they took off, so he was definitely on the plane because she spoke to him on the cell phone. So most of the rabbis said at the time that she could remarry based on that, because for sure he was on the plane, and for sure that plane there was nobody left over from the plane. So yeah.
So Rabbi, if either you have not put instructions in your will, or if you put instructions in your will that you wish to be buried, and the personal representative decides to cremate you, invite your...
You are right.
You
are right.
In the cemetery, because it's the same thing.
100% right. You're 100% right, and therefore, the person that you appoint as a trustee, and it's very important to have a trustee, to have somebody designated, not only for those issues, but also to help out on the other issues. I generally recommend that you have someone who represents you when you, God forbid, you're in a position that you can't make choices. Because as much as you write it down in writing, all the, they have the living will and all that, it's good to have a person who represents you, right? And then really knows what your beliefs are, right?
Yes, but by the same token, if you want to be cremated, you may implicitly tell your representative that's what you want.
Right. And they decide otherwise.
To be able to do it, you'd be better off not putting it in the will.
Yeah, maybe.
Then the rabbi will err on the side of caution and say, well, you didn't want to be cremated, your son decided, so you can go into the Jewish cemetery.
Right. Yeah, but it's very important that whoever this person is that you give your wishes to, you have to trust them. That's what they call trustee. Because there's a lot of trust involved. Yeah, go ahead.
A question.
Question.
How do you feel about a friend has lost a brother, sister, family, and they're non-Jews?
Wow.
How do you feel about I, as a Jew, going into the church to pay my respect?
It's okay to go show respect, obviously, to a non-Jew. It's better if you can get out of going to the church, because most people have afterwards, they have a burial, so you can go to the burial instead of going into the church. That might be an option.
And how would you feel about a Jew going to a crematorium to pay respect?
It's like, let's put it this way. In this day and age, what do I think about people, like a lot of people ask me, they keep kosher, and they're asked to go to a bar mitzvah that's not kosher, right? There's a lot of things people do for shalom bayis. So shalom bayis is one of the issues of family harmony, and every case has to be judged separately, and you figure it out separately. But so look, one needs to take that into consideration. Okay, we're not talking about you being the one that's instructing the cremation to take place, and that we already spoke about. I think that we addressed. But if the cremation is happening already, what can you do? There are different things you could do without, condoning it. Like myself, as a rabbi, especially, it's people will say, okay, if the rabbi's there, then it's okay, right? So many times when people do things that I don't agree to 100%, I'll go afterwards and give them a hug and wish them well, but not in a public forum. So one needs to tread carefully and wisely, and like I say, some of the very important issues is how to keep families together and to make sure that those things are taken into consideration without compromising on our own beliefs. Okay? Shkayach, everyone. To be continued. Next week, I think it's more along the same lines. Next week, I think is autopsy. Chavra, it's a deadly class.